All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of After the Pause, our YouTube podcast series that we really just based off of, well, it really came from our book, A Place Called Braverly, and that's my bookmark today for me to know my space. So in our book, A Place Called Braverly, we have these sections at the end of each chapter called The Pause, and it's really just a chance to pause and reflect on what we've read, figure out how does this apply to my own life. And this book really is, our subtitle is Daring to Live Courageously, Dream Boldly, and Influence Bravery. And really the idea is, how do we do all those things? How do we choose courage because of who God is and because of who he says we are? And so I love that we have this opportunity to step into this space through this YouTube podcast series that we have, because we get to talk about courage. We can talk about what does it look like in our everyday life. And we've had the chance to talk to some friends, do some interviews, but sometimes we just need the OG friends, the originals. So here we are. And
You
I'd
went
like
there.
to point out really quickly, these earrings, we didn't mean to match, but here we are. This is what happens when the OGs get together. Why do I keep saying that? That's not even something I say in normal life. It's so fine. But these are Braverly design earrings. So this book is based on an actual, well, it was inspired by an actual place called Braverly. And Braverly now makes earrings and other amazing things. So you should check them out, friends. Braverly.com. They have amazing products. Kristy, I just got the shoulder bag, the leather one, and oh my gosh, I am obsessed with it and I love it so much.
Yeah. If people need leather products, like Braverly has officially gone into leather products, wallets, clutches, purses, bigger bags, like it is all there, not just earrings, and it is fabulous.
Beautiful and like very good quality. Like
Yeah.
very, very good quality.
Yeah.
So didn't mean to throw in that plug for Braverly, but you're welcome, Braverly. We just
I
love
love it.
them.
Wait. And if you shop Braverly, you are helping to empower women in an actual place here in Mesat, Thailand. You're helping provide a job for them and
Yep.
income for the families. So that's like a win-win-win.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the
sure.
third
Go
win
to
is, but there is
Target.
one.
Go to Target and get like a cheapo bag that's probably supporting a sweatshop, or go to bravery.com, support real women in, well, I mean, they're real women who might be making the other bags, but support these women in Thailand. Man, I'm not even going to cut it. We're going to let it happen because people need to know
Yep.
that we are just real
We
people
speak
that
the truth.
struggle.
We
It's true.
speak the truth.
But this is truly like a product that does more than just looks real good and holds your stuff. Mine does also hold my stuff. This is not exactly what we're talking about today, guys, but I just needed to give a little shout out for our Braverly people because we're matching. But today, Kristy and I, there's just this idea that we've been thinking about and talking about for a while. It's been, I think it's just always a struggle in life. But we wanted to bring it up today on the podcast. And it's this idea of being still. I'm not very good at being still. I'm not ADD by any means, but I just struggle to just be still. And I think though that when we are still, when we have space for that stillness with the Lord, especially not just like sitting, but have that stillness with the Lord, there's so much that comes from that. There's so much courage that we can gather from that space. There's also just so much life that we can find in that space, but it's so hard to find that stillness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, 100%. And it's funny because even as you're saying, like you struggle with being still, I would say very much it's a struggle for me as well. Like, how many times do we think like, oh, I'm just gonna like a day off is coming up, right? And we're just like, oh, I can do nothing if I want. And stillness does not always mean doing nothing. But then somehow, I don't know about you, but for me, like that day will get so filled for me sometimes with not bad things. Like it's good things. It's like a long list of to-dos that I've needed to get done. And there's something freeing for my mind, right? And checking those things off the list. But I almost end the day more exhausted than when I started. And then I still have to tackle the rest of the week. And I'm already starting almost on E,
Yeah.
right? Because it's this whole thing of like finding stillness and what does that actually mean? And so there's a first question. And, I mean, I know we've both said like it doesn't mean necessarily sitting still, but
Yeah.
when you hear the word stillness, help paint a picture here? Like, what does that mean to embrace stillness?
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a good question and a really good point as we start out is like, what does this actually mean? I think that for me, stillness is kind of a state. It's going to sound like really mystical or weird, but I don't mean it to. It honestly is like a state of my soul and a state of my mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like sitting still, although like I think some of the best times of stillness with the Lord for me come in those like moments when I'm just reading his word or journaling or praying or trying to hear his voice. And I'm not doing anything else. Maybe I'm distracted by my phone because that happens because I'm a human being. But I'm not like actively doing other things. But sometimes those moments of stillness do come when I'm doing things or just, in everyday life. But it's stillness for me truly is just this like a peace. It's this moment of being with the Father and hearing his voice. And it is like in a sense like setting aside all other priorities to be with him, to hear from him, to talk with him. And so that's kind of what it looks like for me. But Kristy, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, like certainly some of my greatest moments of truly embracing stillness. And I think it's okay that it sounded mystical because I think it's like that, like it's finding this, we can call it inner peace. Um, yeah, just like a quieting of everything inside, like a quieting of my mind, a quieting of like even like bringing my heart rate down, right? Like just getting quiet from all other voices, all other noises. So a lot of times it does look like actually sitting still and journaling, like you said, or diving into the word. But a lot of times my stillness is quite active. And here's what I mean by that is one of the practices that I've continued to do over and over, and I love it, and I can do it because of my location. But I love to either get out on a bike ride or on a motorbike ride if I'm feeling lazy and too tired and I don't want to battle the wind or the mountains. And I have certain routes that I'll do. I'll have certain places that I go, like it gets me out into the mountains. And obviously, like as I'm going, like the motorbike, it's loud. Like I'm going through town and it's loud. There's lots of activity around me. But I'm very intentional in those moments of like, I'm doing this so that I can just have time, like me and God. And sometimes like I'll have one of my headphones in, not two, that's dangerous. One of my headphones in and have worship music on. And sometimes I'm listening to that. Sometimes there's no music at all. Sometimes I have a rule for myself of like, I'll listen to it out to a certain point and then I shut all the other noise off. And then I spend like the last part of my ride just like worshiping the Lord with, no music or anything like that, and just spending time in prayer, whatever it is, just looking at his creation. So in that sense, like my stillness is still very active, but it puts me in a place where like I'm just very aware of the presence of the Lord. And like I've gone into a space and intentionally tried to create space where like this is just for you and me, and I don't care what's happening around me, it's just for you and me, and that's why I'm here. And so let's just take a ride together. So yeah, that's one for me of what embracing stillness can look like.
Oh yeah. I love that. And when I lived in Thailand too, like I would say the same thing. And even in Chicago, I mean, I just have a smaller season in which I can do that
Yeah.
because winter. And I'm not biking in the winter for fun.
Mm.
Unless it's in my house, which is not the same as going out on the trail or whatever, going on the lakefront, by any means. Surprise. But I would say the same, like that stillness too can be created in moments of activity, but intentional activity. And I think, man, there's just so much there's so much to be gained from that stillness. And
Mhm.
also I think like the biggest thing that can be gained from that is just an intimacy with the Lord. Like
Mhm.
there's so much that he gives us, right? There's so much that the Lord does for us. And so it can be easy to like to desire things like stillness in his presence, or like prayer or things like that, to see like what can I get from the Lord. But like I think that stillness, this idea that we're talking about, one of the greatest gifts that we can get from it is intimacy with him, is like a closer relationship with him. And from that, the overflow of that can change the world. It can change our lives. It can change the world. It can make us more courageous. It can do all of these things, but it's not about those things necessarily. It's about having that intimacy with him. That was something that I noticed when I lived in Thailand, especially. There's something about the team that we're on in Thailand. I'm in Chicago, so it's harder to say like that I'm on it. But like there's something about the team that just values stillness. And it doesn't mean y'all aren't busy, because you guys, I'm pretty sure, are busier than I am. You're in Chicago. But like you guys just place a different priority on being with the Father and hearing from him, and just cultivating that relationship of this connected relationship with him. And it's not that we don't value it here in the States, but we don't really value it here in the States. We value productivity. We value busyness. Like how many times are we like, I'm busy, but it's good. Don't worry. It's fine. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes there's seasons of chaos and the whirlwind. Like neither of us have kids, but like moms out there, especially of young kids at home, like lady, you're in it in a way that we aren't. And then so it's hard to like speak into your life and be like, stillness. I don't have kids, but like there is in like the corporate sense or the job sense, even in the ministry sense for me, we value busyness and we value like doing things. And sometimes with the Father, like it doesn't look like doing things. It looks like cultivating that relationship with him. But there's so much beauty and so many good things that can be so long lasting that come from that intentional time and space. That's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to speak to what you've already shared, like there is something different about this team out here, and I'm so thankful for it. And I will say it's been hard fought. I think all of us, I can't speak for every one of my teammates, but I think that they would say this, like we've all come from a space where we've done it the other way. Right. And that's not to say that we're doing it perfectly now, but I've been in those spaces of like just doing, going. There is always need, right? Like we hear that constantly. And especially as a missionary on the foreign mission field and like living in the place that we do along the border that we do, there is war on the other side. There is destruction. There are families that are truly hurting. Like they don't know where their meal tomorrow is coming from, right? Like there is incredible need around us all the time. And it could be very easy to get in this space of like, do, right? Like there's never a reason not to do something, right? Like there's always going to be need around us. And I think in the past, for each of us, I think we would say that like, we've probably stepped in that space, like really poorly of, yeah, I have to do all these things. And you can almost set yourself up as like, I have to be the answer to everyone's problems and the solution here. And that's not what God has called us to. And there's also the reality of this pressure sometimes as a missionary that you feel of like, people are supporting me and they want to know, like, what are they supporting? You know, like, what am I doing? That's a huge question I get asked all the time, right? Like, what do you do? What are you doing? We always ask that about each other. And so all that to say, like, you can get really caught up in this space of doing instead of being. And I think that there's a way, right? We're called to both. I just think a lot of times the doing wins out over our being. So to say that it's hard fought, I think we've all lived in spaces of burnout in the past. I know I had a big season of burnout before coming out here, and it was just the reality of the pace that I was running my life. And I can't say it's the fault of other people. Like there was definitely systems set up and like mindsets that existed that I bought into. And so I just kept pushing myself with those mindsets that were unhealthy. But I held on to those and I accepted them and I made it like, this is what I'm going to live by. And so it's been a lot of really letting those things go, recognizing what that did in my life and that if I'm going to actually last, if I'm going to survive this, I have to do something different. And so as a team, like we've come to the table with that same mindset. And I'm so thankful for that, of just like, we're just not going to make it if we're working at this ridiculous pace without actually like taking time to be with the Lord, and be with the Lord as a team, but also be with the Lord individually. And what does that look like? And how do we cultivate those kind of spaces again as a team to do that? Because that's just what we've decided we're going to be about. But how do I, as an individual, make space for that? And that's where I feel very fortunate being where I am, because my team carries that same mindset. And I recognize it's not a mindset. It was never a mindset that I really encountered in America to this level. That's not to say that people aren't about doing life with the Lord. They absolutely are, but it just looked very different. So we make space for each other to have space with the Lord. And we just value it so much that like, it's just a part of our regular conversation, right? Like, what's the Lord speaking to you? Like, hey, what do you need this week to like just be filled with life and be able to like bring your best to the table, right? And that's just not typical conversation that you find in a workspace, not certainly not in a secular workspace, but sometimes not even in a Christian workspace, right? Like it doesn't always play out like that. So for me, I feel fortunate in I've got a team that we're all collectively creating that space together, and we still have to fight for it. But for you and for others, right, in American culture, that there is such a value of busyness at a different way of embracing busyness. And there's just so many, there's just crazy demands all the time. And I mean, there's demands everywhere, but how do you cultivate that space for yourself? Like, obviously there's challenges to it. And so, yeah, what are steps that you do to try to create that space for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that I did it better in Thailand. I think that part of that though, I think, man, there are so many demands and so many like distractions, and not that you don't experience that in Thailand at all. It's just, there's different like pressures because of your team that like has said, we're going to prioritize this. And so it's been hard. It's been really tricky to like come back from Thailand. And that was years ago that I haven't been back to Thailand since 2020. And I'm still just like, oh, I miss that. Like I miss the intentionality of the team. I think it's such an interesting question. Like, what do you need this week? Because I think that we ask similar questions here in some regards, but like, I think that the focus tends to be not on like, what do you need? The answer is rarely like, I just need stillness and time with the Lord. Like I need that space. And so I think for me, some of the things that I have had to do, one, I've just had to like prioritize as best as I can, like time with the Father, like almost every morning, just like having that time with him. I'm not always perfect at it by any means because life can get in the way. But trying to prioritize that. And I think the other piece that that I'm not necessarily great at, but I'm trying to get better at is man, looking at there's moments at the end of the day where I just need to like turn off my brain with Netflix. You know what I mean? Like I just need some space. I need a minute to just like pause, or I need to just like whatever it is, whatever our like turn off our brain of choice medium is. But I think too, this stillness calls to us in different spaces. And there's moments that we prioritize, like I prioritize other things over just having that stillness with the Father. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, well, I don't really want to like connect with the Lord right now. I just want to like watch this show on Netflix. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes it like that is okay. But I certainly notice a difference. And I notice a difference in Thailand. There is some moments where like internet goes out or like whatever it is. And you're like forced to be like, okay, how am I going to like, what am I going to do right now? And I feel like you experience this a lot in Kenya, especially coming back from Kenya and realizing like, wow, the internet's terrible. And like, those blackouts, like they can be real, although you guys have a generator. But I think too, there's so many distractions that one of the things that like I need to do in my own life is set aside those distractions and those times when there are spaces to like exhale. Like this isn't a call to like not show up to work today
Mhm.
or like not show up to those spaces where you need to show up, but it is a call to like evaluate like how is my time being spent? Like what's the state of my soul right now? And do I really need to be pouring like I have to do this? Like what's the state of my soul? And should I really be pouring in more like entertainment or more things like that? Or should I like really just pause and be with the Father right now? So I think that some of it for me is just asking those questions and then just trying to show up to that space. If that makes sense. This isn't like I feel like this could sound like really like religious or duty, like don't do that
Yeah.
thing, like be with God. And that's not what I mean by any means. I think that there's different priorities that we've had, and I've had to learn to like, I'm trying to learn how to prioritize that better in the space, like when I do have time, because
Mhm.
I don't always have time, like in the morning or when it's quiet. I need to make it at other times, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's so good. And yeah, I get it, right? Like the moment you start talking about like spending time with the Lord and like things that we should do, right? Like
Mhm.
it sounds very checklist and it's
Yeah.
not our heart in it. It's not what we mean, but there is something to like intentionally getting into his presence. And like that involves a lot of times a no to
Yeah.
something else so that you can say yes to that. And
Yeah.
it's something for as much as I have a team that like really values just taking time to be still and be with the Lord, like it's still a battle out here. The number of times like I've also just wanted to sit down and throw something on Netflix, and sometimes I do,
Yep.
right? But I always have to ask myself that question of like, Kristy, how's your heart right now? How's your mind? And what's gonna like fill it back up right now? And I'm not always great at asking myself that question. Sometimes I'm just like, ignore everything, like, you know?
I'm fine.
Yeah. But I also just notice a difference in myself. Like I can tell those seasons that I'm walking like really closely with the Lord versus those that I'm really just kind of going through the motions and
Yeah.
feels a little more lifeless. And I've I've oh gosh, I've tried to like put enough I hate this word, but discipline in my life.
Yeah.
I hate it in relationship to like walking with the Lord, right? Like it just
Yeah.
sounds so to-do list, and I don't
Yeah.
mean it like that. But I've put things into practice enough times now that like I really feel the difference when I don't put those same things into practice. I don't value time with the Lord, and I'm grateful for that. It's been a hard fought battle, and I still do not get it perfect. Um, but there's just something to like just having an awareness of like how's the condition of your heart, how's the condition of your mind, what's going to fill you up right now. Is this like something that's going to fill you up, or do you just need to take a second? Like it doesn't have to be long. Do you just need a journal for a little bit? Do you just need to like read some encouragement for a second, like get into the word? Do you need to, I don't know, like paint something? That's a really peaceful thing for me. I'm not a great painter, but just like create something, right? Like
Yeah.
allow yourself a moment to kind of decompress from the day by doing something that's not just a tune your brain like out and shut everything
Mhm.
off, but like press in a little bit, but into something that like feels life-giving. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a battle. And again, it means saying no to something, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're trying to say yes to something, it means we have to say no to something else.
Yeah.
Um, and that can feel like the biggest battle right there is to actually say no to those other things.
Yeah, absolutely. But like the thing that we're saying yes to is so much sweeter. And I don't mind the word discipline because I think that for me, I'm a runner and it makes me think of practice. Like
Yeah.
it makes me think of like choosing to show up in a space that like I don't want to run every day. Surprise. I actually like right now, I really don't like running. I just signed up for a half marathon. What a mistake. But like to me, it brings to mind like this idea of showing up in a space, even if I don't feel like like I want to in that moment, or like I don't feel like I'm necessarily good at it. And it brings to mind like practicing. And I think that even in stillness, this idea of like being with the Father, there's practice in it. And there's practice in trying to hear his voice. And there's practice in trying to figure out, man, how do I connect with him? Like what are ways that God and I like really connect? Because it looks different for you than for me. Like somebody listening to this and just heard, like, I want to paint something. They're like, nope, I don't want to paint something. Like, and so I think that this idea of being still, like, one, it's saying yes to something so much sweeter, and it's a practice. And it might not feel sweet in the moment, but as we practice it over time, it just gets sweeter and sweeter. Like when I first moved to Thailand and tried to like almost like detox from America, it wasn't that sweet. It was like, what am I doing? I felt like I was floundering, like in my relationship with the Lord. But as like I practiced it, as I prioritized different things, it got sweeter and it got more and more special, because it is just a practice, and it's just showing up and saying yes to the Father, believing that it's going to be so worth it. And it's not always easy to do, but I think from that space, like we said earlier, there's just so much beauty that comes from it. And there's so much that not only in our own life are there things that like I look at that season in Thailand and I see the ways like I grew, or things that I feel like the Lord said to me. But I think that when the Lord does speak those things to us, or it does like meet us in those moments, it's not just for us. Like we get to share that with those around us. And so we get to find life for sure, but like other people get to experience that as well. Like kind of that idea of the ripples that go out from your courage. It's just the ripples that go out from your life. And so when we're connected with the Father, like the ripples that go out from that can change the world. It can change other people.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Instantly, I thought of this scripture, Acts 4:13, about, I think it's Peter and John. And they're before, I don't know if it's, I don't remember who they're in front of, if it's the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, whatever it is. And there's this statement that's made of like, and they could tell that these men had been with Jesus. And I just think that that's the ripples that we're talking about, right? And like, oh, it's so fun for me out here. So like sometimes Amy will say to me, like we'll connect together, and I'll just come into a space and just start talking. And she's like, you've been with Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, like it's been such a good morning, and I just share a little bit about what the Lord's doing. And like vice versa, like I can see it on her when she's been with Jesus. Like there's just something about that, like what people are kind of giving off, that you can just tell like they've been filled up with Jesus. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's the very thing that he promises us. That's why he calls us into that space in the first place. And I mean, I will always turn to the scripture in this and what Jesus talks about in that. But like, oh, I've shared so many times on here, Acts 17:28, right? Like in him we live and move and have our being. Like within that space with him, like he fills us with everything that we need. Like all that he is, he gives to us. And it's beautiful. And Psalm 23:1 and 2, like he calls us into the green pastures. He makes us lie down beside the still waters, and he restores our soul. Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Like it's in those spaces that like he gives us the very things that we need, not only for ourselves, but that we need to carry out into the spaces that he's asked us to walk, because the people in those spaces need them too.
Yeah.
And if we can have an overflow in our life, like that's what's going to be poured out on them as we go into those spaces. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And yet you have to fight for it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's such a like a beautiful idea to kind of end on, of just like this idea of stillness. It is truly, it's not just for us so that our hearts can find rest or peace, but it's for those around us too. Like there's so much doing that we do here in Chicago that's ministry, right? And so we're trying to pour out, but like what if the most important thing we could do in ministry or in life in general, right? But this is just the context I'm coming from. What if the most important thing we could do in ministry here in Chicago is to truly just be with the Lord, to be with Jesus, and let that pour out from us? Because until our being with him is at that spot, our doing is just going to be a bunch of doing. And so friend, whatever it is that you do, like you You might be a mom, you might be just in full-time work, not in ministry, not in nonprofit, whatever it is. Man, may your being be in such a way that your doing just flows from that and people see Jesus. Because I think at the end of the day, like that's what matters. That's what we're striving for, is to just be able to just pour out just that overflow of who Jesus is. That's certainly our hope for ourselves and for you. We're not always going to get it right, but man, is his grace sufficient for us?
Amen.
Amen. Man, so every week we just like to close with a quote from the book. And so this week, this is the quote that we've chosen to wrap up on. And it says, "Here in this love, we find the courage to live bravely because we know that his love catches us. We can step off the road called striving or proving or working and enter a space of rest. This resting place can be the very source and root of our life, changing the decisions we make, the way we live, and the way we let fear affect us." And I think that's so perfect that we can live from this place of rest and love in the Father and who he is, and all of that can flow, or the rest of our life can flow from that. The rest of our being can flow from that. And that's the perfect place for it to flow from. So friends, I hope that you are encouraged and challenged in this. If you have not grabbed a copy of A Place Called Braverly, you can do that wherever books are sold. You can grab it on our website, aplacecalledbraverly.com. If you go there, you can also find a free ebook of A Place Called Braverly and a free small group guide. You don't need the small group guide to go through the book, but it's available if you want it. We just care so much about you and your walk with the Lord. We care about your community. And we want to walk with you in this. So check it out. Send us any questions or comments that you have. We want to hear from you. And we'll for sure see you next week.